Hello, hello. Welcome to the very first episode of the Unseen Scientist podcast, where we delve into the exciting behind the scenes lives of researchers so that we can have a platform to inform and support each other. I am super excited to kick off this series with my dear friend and colleague. And not only is she a dear friend and colleague, she's been a great mentor to me and so many others in our institute. So I'm grateful that I get to have this time with her today. And she is, of course, Dr. Nancy Wang. Dr. Nancy is the inaugural Ruth Bishop Fellow, which involves a 5-year fellowship, amazing, which is a collaboration between the Murdoch Children's Research Institute, MCRI, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which supports a mid-career female vaccinology researcher. And so, fun fact, Ruth Bishop discovered rotavirus in the 70s. How amazing is that? So, thank you, Nancy, for joining. Welcome. How do you feel about joining this podcast? And how have you been?
It's a great privilege to be here. A little bit nervous. Yes, it's a great opportunity to share some of my personal stories and hope that it can bring some comfort or even inspirations to others that might going through similar stages in their life or career.
Amazing. Thank you. And Nancy, if you didn't know, is not only a girl boss leading her own lab, but she's also a mother to a beautiful little boy. And she's just recently announced her pregnancy, her second pregnancy. So congratulations, Nancy. How exciting. I can't wait to meet the newest one.
Thank you, Jessie. Yes, it's going to be busy.
I hope you get enough sleep in the next year or so. And the reason why I asked Nancy to start this podcast with me for the first episode is because not only is she a lab head now, but she's a mother, right? And if you can tell from the title of this episode is going to be about pregnancy in academia. So because she's gone through it once and now a second time she's going to go through it again, I thought she'd be the perfect candidate. I guess this topic came about because I was talking to a few friends of mine about how difficult it must be for a female researcher to undergo pregnancy, because academia and research is a really rewarding journey, but it is stressful and arduous sometimes. So some of the questions we might have might be, would this impact your career in a sort of negative way? And would there be any challenges? A lot of people might be hesitant about becoming pregnant or starting a family because of this. So I wanted to ask your opinion about how you felt about starting a family pre-pregnancy and how you feel about these situations post-pregnancy.
Well, these are obviously very, very personal decisions to make for everyone who's going to make them. In my case, I have a very supportive partner. We've been together for a long time, but neither of us felt very strongly about starting a family. I was obviously in research and pretty busy with the work life. I hit 35 during the pandemic, and so that's a time where a lot of women start asking the questions: Are we going to? Because you hear the clock ticking louder than ever. Certainly was the case for me. And at the time, at the start of pandemic, I also had just won a major funding, my first major funding. And I thought it'd be something that I've wanted for so long. It was such a positive reinforcement that comes rarely in our career, as you know. But I still felt there were things missing. I felt like it didn't fill the voids that I've been feeling for a long time. And eventually, through some soul searching, I felt that I wanted to know how it's like to have a family, because I wanted there to be more love in my life, more than what I get from my husband and my family. So that was, for us, the decision was that my husband had said to me years ago, before we had our child, that when we can answer the question of why we're having a child and both agree with it, then we are ready. If we couldn't get to that point, maybe we shouldn't be doing it because our friends are having children, or because it's the age to, or because it's family pressure. So for us, it's a combination of finally maturity came with aging, and also the pandemic that kind of forced us to slow down a little bit and do some internal reflection. I'm not sure if that's really answering your question, but for us, it's making that personal commitment is wanting, for me, wanting another dimension in life and wanting more love, and probably also going inside with some early signs of career burnout that I know a lot of people went through during the COVID time for different reasons. That I had some internal reflections and decided that it wasn't everything, because there was gaps that couldn't be filled, even if that was some success in the work that I was doing.
Thank you. I'm a sort of early career researcher, and you're now a mid-career researcher. And do you think there is a nice time to think about starting a family?
That's a really good question. Most people say that there's never a right time. Um, and again, it's a very personal journey. I think we all get propelled into it for different reasons. And I would say in my personal case that having a very supportive partner who was mature about it, who was prepared to go through the journey and share the responsibility, both during pregnancy, but especially after the child was born, that made all of the difference. I sometimes talk to other female colleagues in similar age groups, and they're thinking about starting a family but worry about the impact on their career, which I'm sure we'll talk more about that later. I guess at one point, you always have to worry about, am I able to go through with it? Is it going to impact on my career? Is it worth it? Am I ready for it? And I think at one point, for me, the penny dropped, and I thought it's going to be hard, it's going to be unknown. I may or may not be well prepared for it, but I want to do it. And then any difficulties or hard times that come along, you fall back to that position, going, but I wanted to do it. You know, if we work in science, work in a competitive research environment, we know it's not an easy path. We complain and whinge to our friends about it all the time, but then the next day we come back to it and try just as hard, because ultimately there's a large part of us that still wants that. And so when the thought of having a child becomes that, wherever you are in your career path, I think that's an indication at least that you're mentally ready. And being mentally ready would be, I think, a great position moving forward, because you need that certainty in yourself, not because others told you this is a good time, not because you just got a grant or not haven't got a grant. You shouldn't let the career decide for you. Certainly, if you talk to you talk to female academics that have had children either recently or some time ago, they would tell you that whenever they had their child or children, be it early, in the middle, or later in their career, they made it to work. And I guess that's what comes down to it. It's whenever it happens, you make it to work. You think of other things that happen in life that would also impact on your career. You might have carers' responsibilities to other members of your family. You might have personal injuries. You might have unforeseeable things happening to your work. Your lab may have burned down. Your boss may have suddenly passed away. None of those things hopefully would happen to you, but none of those things you can plan for. But when they happen to you, you deal with them. You work out what's the most important thing to you, and then you deal with that. You don't want to, you don't like it, you don't want to think about it too much. But if that was what then you have to deal with, you do that. And so I guess anything that comes with having children, so long as this is truly something you wanted to do, any difficulty that comes with that, you deal with it. I think
Mm.
that's sort of been how I have been looking at it.
So to summarize, there's no right time. It's a personal journey, and you just make it work as long
That's
as you
right.
have
You
the
make it work.
conviction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when you are sure to yourself, when you feel that you're, I guess being a scientist, you're probably never 100% sure of something, but when you feel that your wanting is greater than your anxiety, that's a good indication that you are at least partway ready.
You just mentioned about other colleagues that you have that are pregnant or have been pregnant. What do you think is the ratio between female researchers that have children versus no children?
Oh dear. That's a good question. I think most female researchers over the age of 40 would have had children, but
Mm.
certainly there are some who don't. I would think that in my close circle, if I have to put a number to it, I'll probably say 70 to 80% have children, and
Mm.
uh,
Wow. That's sort of an unexpected number, I think. I would have expected maybe lower, but
okay.
that's
Um,
good to know that it's about 70 to 80% in your experience.
yes, well, in my experience, yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And do you think they also expected uh, the pregnancy to affect their career? And before going on maternity leave, did they make any arrangements or adjustments so that they can properly prepare for that period of maybe stagnancy?
I think the big unknown, even if you are thinking about starting family, is exactly when you will be blessed, and that's something
Mm,
that none of us can prepare.
right.
Um, I think this is where you would um, it'd be really beneficial if you have a good peer support group.
Mm,
So other working mothers around you that have gone through pregnancy and having children recently who would in similar career stages, so they would be aware of opportunities. A lot of institute these days have various sized and duration fellowships and funding support to encourage females to come back from extended period of leave,
mm,
um, most commonly due to pregnancy, but sometimes during the carer responsibilities as well. A lot of them don't have a restriction on how many times you can take them. So some of them
oh,
um, you can take them once, and you might be coming back and take a second round of maternity leave later. Um, the other really helpful thing is that the partners can also take parental leave. So
mm,
it's not just the birth mothers who needs to be planning of it, all of it. And certainly here in Australia, the partner leaves are or the parental leave from the non-birth mother is well and widely recognized. You can share government funding for parental leave between the two.
mm,
um, uh, where we have been at Melbourne Uni, certainly that parental leave is granted to the partners as well. So it is well worth talking to other new mothers, but certainly other new parents in general, because each of them will be able to give you a different perspective on what you could apply for that is standard to your country's legislation, so what you're legally allowed to take as
mm,
leave,
mm,
and then what your institute might specifically provide for you, and other benefits through social welfare, etc., that you might be able to apply for as well. So that's yeah, I didn't know, I haven't really thought about this too much, but once I fell pregnant and it became obvious, it almost felt like you have a unofficial social group called the new parents and new mother at your institute.
mm.
And I've been given just so much baby stuff, and we
Oh,
didn't have to buy a pram, we didn't have to buy a car seat up front, and so much baby clothes, and all this just super helpful advice and understanding from people that have gone through very similar experience recently. And that peer support has really made all the difference for me. And initial guiding, there was a colleague who sent me an email detailing everything that she's applied for, from grants to just applying through HR, how to take leave and when, and she had discussions with whom about it. Having a supportive supervisor or mentor would be very helpful as well, which I very fortunately did have one. And so having that support was really important, especially for the first pregnancy when I started telling people you have this little timid feeling that you don't know how people are going to respond, because this obviously means that you won't be there for certain parts of the year, or you'll be, pretty distracted, and that means that you won't be able to commit as much of yourself to teaching or to supervising students or lab work, etc. But just that overwhelming support I've received was extremely comforting and confidence building.
That's wonderful. You had that support network at the Institute. It's really good to hear. And it was just also going to ask, during your maternity leave, you're talking about your responsibilities and how that might change during that period. You had a student at the time, and you were
Yes.
also working as a postdoc before, doing your own lab work and etc. So how did you manage that during that period?
From my own lab work, I think I dived in and read a whole heap of safety documents, the sort of work I did, and understood what I should or shouldn't be doing during pregnancy. I think I felt that that was my responsibility to do that. But once I did tell people that I was pregnant, then people also told me what they were doing in the workspace around me. So that was helpful, so that not only understood immediate risks of my own lab work, but also the lab work around me, so I could plan my work around that and minimize the exposures to things that could potentially be risky.
Mm.
In terms of supervising, so during my pregnancy, it wasn't too bad because I was still coming to work maybe 3 or 4 days a week and do 1 or 2 days working from home on average until the very end.
Mm.
During my maternity leave, I kept up on having video calls with my student. I think it was in retrospect, I think it was a good opportunity for her to step up and take some leadership. Whether she shares that opinion or not is a very different thing. I think the student has grown a lot in that time, whether that was by her choice or not. And so eventually we were able to meet once a week or once a fortnight on call, and then keeping up emails. That was very good for me. I think the end result for her PhD was pretty good too. So in that sense, it worked. It worked well for us.
And so just before giving birth, when did you stop coming to work, and then when did you go back to work?
I was induced at 38 weeks because of underlying medical conditions. So for me, I was very fortunate that I knew exactly when I was going to go in. So I stopped coming into the lab, doing lab work at about 34 weeks into pregnancy. And then I was working from home, working on a grant and a paper that I was writing at the time. To be honest, I think the productivity during those 3 or 4 weeks that I worked from home wasn't very high at all. That was something I felt difficult to deal with mentally, because I had an expectation of how much I should be achieving in a working week, and I certainly just wasn't doing that. A bit of it is that the pregnancy affecting the mind, which, mind you, is a real thing. Before that, I thought that people say to you that it's this baby brain phenomenon, and I used to think that's just the thing that men had invented to put women down. But I take that back. It's a real thing, at least was a real thing for me. So part of it was that the brain was somehow affected by this whole process even before birth. And a lot of it was physical discomfort with a big belly. I couldn't get comfortable sitting down or lying down, which was very annoying. And the only comfortable position was standing up, which wasn't great. Um, yeah, so I think a lot of it in that time for me, a few weeks before birth, I was already starting to come to realize that productivity at work isn't going to be what I used to feel anymore, because I have to give in to some extent to what my body tells me that I could do,
Mm.
can't do. And that was a relatively new realization to me during pregnancy. Before, you pretty much would just push on and try to push on more and try to push on more. During pregnancy, I felt like I really did feel my personal barrier where I couldn't push anymore and just had to slow down and accept it. And so that was kind of a bit of self-discovery in that time for me.
Mm. So then going back to that again, you had to stop working gradually, just maybe 3 or 4 weeks before. But were you already on maternity leave by then, or is this something that happens after you give birth?
I was officially on leave from 36 week onwards, and the
Mhm.
baby was born at 38 weeks. So I did have 2 weeks of official leave.
Right.
My plan was at a time that for the 2 weeks before, so from 34 to 36 weeks, I was going to work part time. And then from 36 to 38 weeks, I was also going to work part time. So even though it was full time and then 2 weeks off, I sort of was going to take it as 4 weeks part time.
Mm.
Mm, it sort of worked out that way. I'm really grateful that I had a supportive supervisor who just let me do my own thing. I at the time had my own funding, so I had some flexibility there. The biggest pusher for work actually came from myself, that I'd
Mm.
always had this at the time. I'd always had this anxiety of that I wasn't achieving as much as I was hoping I could,
Mm.
because I was still judging myself by the pre-pregnancy standards of God.
Yeah. Mm.
I should be able to push through this much in a week. I should be able
Mm.
to do this much from start to finish. And if I sit down to do writing, I should be able to do it from, 8 hours a day, but I couldn't do that. I, I, I physically and mentally couldn't do it. And that was a state that I took a long time to come back from the end of pregnancy to the few months of intensive nursing, to even coming back from maternity leave. That took a very long time to come back to a pre-pregnancy level of productivity on a per time unit basis. For me, at the moment, I would say that per time unit, whatever that unit is, be per day or per hour, I would think my productivity is about 80% of my pre-child level.
Mhm.
And that was something that I had to make peace with
Mm.
myself, rather than to say that my goal is to bring it up to 100%. For me, the important lesson and the adjustment is to say, be happy with 80%. It's not what it used to be. You're not what you used to be. You have
Mhm.
other things in life now. You have other responsibility. You have other things you want to enjoy, because it's not just responsibility. There's a little bit of fun every so often when they're not throwing tantrums, and being peaceful. And then you got to take your time. You got to give that time, and you got to give that mental space. If you can still get 80%, then the important thing is how to make that 80% work towards the most important things that you want to achieve, rather than stress about that missing 20%.
Mm. Mhm. Okay. And also, you were talking about there were some grants and opportunities for you to take after pregnancy. Is that correct? Could you please expand more on that?
Yes, so this is obviously very specific to the institute where
Mm.
I have been. So I have been extremely fortunate that Melbourne Uni and my home department have both been very, very supportive. So straight after coming back from maternity leave, 8 months after the baby was born, I pretty much ran out of funding support just a few months after. Then my home department picked up my salary for another 8 months, during which time I wrote and was very fortunately awarded the Career Disruption Fellowship from Melbourne Uni, which supports full salary for a year with a little bit of research support as well. I couldn't have made it for this long after the childbirth. So my first child is now 2.5. So I couldn't have made it this far to even be able to apply for the Ruth Bishop Fellowship I now have if I didn't have this interim support. I was very shy to talk to people about it when I was about to run out of funding. But when I spoke to my head of department and the department manager, they were both extremely supportive, much to my surprise, genuinely. The finances were tight, but they were prepared to support me because they recognized that female researchers, this is a life stage, a career stage that a lot of us gone through, and we have invested as departments and as a whole education and work system in those researchers. For most of us, this is still at the earlier part of your career. You're still looking at 20, 30, 40 years of working life ahead of you. And then you want these people to reach their full potential and make the contribution, if not to pay back the investment that you've already put into them. So why not support them further? So that was a message that I heard from my department. I heard from the university over and over during the pregnancy, which I was genuinely surprised. I really didn't think that would be this much support. But in our case, it turned out to be. So I was very grateful. As I said, there were small times. So the university funding was 12 months, and there were smaller fundings for different career stages. I was at level B, which is a senior postdoc level. So there's an early postdoc level that you could apply for, or if you were already a lab head, there's another fellowship that you could apply for. So there's a range of different funding amounts for different career stages and for different duration to suit people with at different stages of career and needing support in different way. I'm not saying that the system had got it perfect. We still have a long way to go. But I felt like that support was just absolutely vital. If I didn't have those two funding support in place to give me to further my lifespan after coming back, I certainly wouldn't have made it this far to be able to apply and then get the fellowship I now have. That's for the career. And on a personal perspective, coming back from maternity leave, I had postnatal depression. So I came back. It was hard on many fronts, both professionally and personally. I was trying very hard to bring up my productivity and re-engage with people, understand where things were, and dealing with, I guess, my own health conditions, both physical and mental. And I constantly wondered why I guess I constantly wondered whether I'm still worthwhile. Why people really want to see me here, or they just being kind. And so having those support was a positive reinforcement that just couldn't be more important to me on a personal level.
And I know this is more institute specific, but those funding streams, are they competitive, or if you just apply, you automatically get it? And what's the application process like? Do you have to put up a proposal? Is it like a 2-pager or a 10-pager like a grant?
So at Melbourne Uni, this is a very streamlined process. It's a very set application form that you fill out, much like you do with a fellowship application. It is a competitive process, so not everybody gets it. At Melbourne Uni, it is some of them, depending on the criteria, some of them are also open to the partner, so that the other parent, not just the birth mother. So that's something to keep in mind with as well. I was fortunate that before I fell pregnant and going on maternity leave, that I've already written several grants. The Melbourne Uni internal grant system was really good because a lot of their questions actually line up to what the national competitive grant schemes would ask. So in a way, it's almost like preparing you to converting your internal grant applications to a future application. So for example, the internal grant for the career interruption scheme asks a lot of questions about what is the impact, how would you quantify the impact this had on your career. So in this process, there's also past grants that we could look at as well. And so I developed a way of drawing a graph to show my annual publication output and grant funding input, if you like. And when COVID hit, and when I fell pregnant, and when I went on leave and came back, etc. So for the internal grant, you might feel that's a little bit of overkill, but it was a good opportunity to put these facts in one place because it is how it is. And what time you took off is, so you sort of get that information all together once, and in future when you apply for other funding, suddenly when I applied for the Ruth Bishop Fellowship, I had that information pretty much ready to go. So it was a good opportunity to put things together.
Great. I know that you mentioned how fortunate you were to have all the support from the Institute and people around you. And if you could give the Institute some advice on what they could improve, because I think you mentioned a little bit about how it's not a perfect system, what would it be?
I think there could be more of those funding schemes available. As you mentioned, it is a competitive system, so not everybody who needs it gets it. It is still tailored more towards people that are becoming independent or semi-independent, whereas I think if this was, firstly, there's more opportunities for the very early stage career, and secondly, better advertised, not something that you would fall pregnant and ask for your peers, then find out, but advertise, for example, in newsletters that when the rounds open, or that the recipients are announced with newsletters with their permission and things like that, so that you feel that this is really part of the process. There's nothing really out of the way or really special. I mean, it is a special stage of your life, but that there is a path there, so that when you're thinking about it before full commitment, you already know that there's support's available, and you don't have to have gone so far in your career before you can get the support. Even if the early support might be smaller in amounts or shorter duration, I think it's the gesture that this is worthwhile supporting that we all wanted to hear in the early stages.
And I guess we could talk about post-pregnancy now that you have your child. Do you think that you spend enough time with your child? And maybe a lot of us thinking about before pregnancy, we worry about not having that time with our child, so we kind of hesitate about the pregnancy. So could you please share a little bit about that?
I certainly wish I could spend more time with him. There's no doubt about that. At the same time, we all need personal space, and sometimes it can get a little bit full on. Um, if I was fortunate with the institute and peer support, I'm extremely fortunate with my partner support. I think my son is definitely daddy's boy. And in the middle of the night when he cries out, he cries daddy rather than cries mum.
Oh,
In some ways, that's really good because dad is more available than I am, and that's our personal situation. And so he's there for him a lot, and he grew that bond with him once I finished nursing him. On the other hand, I feel a little bit uneasy when, for example, with my son's childcare earlier this year, we went through Mother's Day celebration where they talk about how special a mother was to a child. And I almost felt guilty with that. In fact, I did feel guilty about that. I felt like that most special person that taking that primary carer's role in my son's life is my husband. And that's just our family situation. It's good that he has that person, but on the other hand, that is not me. And so for me, I grew up with the social mindset that the mother does all the caring. Well, not all the caring, but the mother is the primary carer when you're hurt, when you need help, when you need care. You go to the mother, and at least in early life, that's your closest parent, and the mother is just so special. And I'm not sure if I'm that's so special to my son. I feel that very so special is actually his father. So in a way, doesn't matter if it's the mother being that so special, or is it the father being so special, so long as you get that very special person, parent in your life. Yeah, but that's a philosophical question I haven't worked out. My family also feels a bit double-minded about me having a second child. They feel like if I couldn't be that very first special person in my son's life is a good idea to bring yet another child? That's also a question I haven't worked out. So I'm sorry I don't have a lot of set answers for you in that sense. That I think between me and my partner, my son's definitely getting enough parent. I do think he loves me and knows that I'm the second most special person. And for me, I think sometimes I need to take comfort in that I'm the second most special person, and somewhat a bit cheeky to take comfort that when he's throwing a tantrum, he wants Baba, not Mama. So maybe that's a good thing. But yeah, so whether you think it's a bit of a role reversal, or this is the modern family makeup, or we shouldn't be ranking the family's love, but the child doesn't know that. The child just knows, I want something, I want care, I want human interaction, and who's here for me, who's able to give me attention, give me time without looking at that clock, looking at that phone to say I need to be elsewhere. You know, my son knows the routine is he gets up in the morning. If I start putting my shoes on, he goes, Mama, work. He does that Monday to Friday and does that on the weekend as well. But if my husband puts on his shoes, he never says anything, because he knows that they're going to head out and have fun. They're going to do things together. They're not. Whereas for me, there's an expectation that in the morning I will leave. So in that sense, I can't say I've answered to that one, or a set answer to that one. We are a little bit atypical in that sense, that daddy is doing more care than mum at this point in our son's life. The first few months when I was nursing him, certainly Baba barely ever got a hug because he's either I'm feeding him, or he's just fell asleep on me, or he's throwing a tantrum, or being upset and I need to comfort him. And so at that point, it's very bonding, it's very tiring, can be a little bit stressful. I always felt that if the child cries, everybody looks at the mother going, what are you doing? So there's a lot of social expectations and stereotypes that comes from others, and sometimes I'm almost imagine that I hear others are saying to me. I feel a little bit guilty and stressed, which is something I'm actively trying to deal with. Every time I hear people say that mums are so special, mums hold it together, all these Mother's Day things that people say about, I guess, more traditionally the role of the mother to the child. And I feel that I'm not fulfilling that expectation. How my son feels about it, I guess I have to question him a bit later in life. He's not old enough to give that feedback yet. I think he's happy. So we might just have to be happy with that.
I think the atypical family, those sorts of family dynamics are becoming more common, and
Yes, that's
from
true.
atypical to more typical, got such diversity right now. And actually, talking about that, what can male colleagues or non-female colleagues do to help make this sort of institution or the university a better place for female researchers that are pregnant?
I think understanding and support. Be a bit more sensitive trying to make jokes. I think we probably it might be a little bit of stereotype again, that guys can sometimes make jokes without thinking too much about it. I certainly went through a time, this is talking purely about me, during pregnancy and straight after coming back from maternity leave, that even the most remote joke that's probably not even about me, I was hypersensitive because I was internally feeling insecure. I was worried that people were judging my performance, people were judging how much I was putting in, people were judging whether I'm being a good worker. And if I'm seeing at work, then I was worried that people were judging whether I was being a good mother, whether I'm going home to my child. Even the casual comments that people make, like, oh, you're still at work, I thought you would have gone home. I would take that to mean I'm a bad mother because I haven't gone home to be with my child. And it's clearly not, that the comment is still clearly not been made with that mindset, but that was the sort of just all sorts of crazy thoughts that goes through my head as I was trying to grow to live with both of those two roles that are sometimes can be a little bit contradicting. And sometimes it's hard for me to decide where I want to put my time to, be it doing more work on the weekend or at night, or spending some time with a child who's clearly grumpy and not happy. So if the child's being all cutesy and happy and behaving, of course you want to spend time with them. That's no question. But if they're having a tough time at night, which happens a lot, particularly for toddlers, do you sort of just go, Daddy, you deal with it, I got work to do? Or do you say, as a parent, that's part of my parenting, I should also be there and let him understand that Mummy's also here for you? Again, I don't have a right answer to that, but that's something I've been working at. So coming back to your question to what a male colleague or a non-parent colleague can do, I think is to just give the parent some space and support, I guess. Yeah, but certainly in the colleagues that I've had, I don't think there's anything I would want them to do different. And I had a great interaction with my colleagues. Some of them, particularly female colleagues, come to talk to me about what their thoughts about, potentially starting a family with their partner, or their doubts or worries and anxiety. And I felt quite privileged actually, that they trusted in me to talk about such personal thing. And I also through your request to have this podcast actually, understood that it's a internal debate that so many of us have, but we just don't have it openly enough. We're a lot better than where things were 20, 30 years ago. But yeah, there's still things that we can do better.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I do have a final question for you. This is a mystery question. So, if you could give one piece of advice to PhD student Nancy,
Oh,
what
PhD
would it be?
student. About pregnancy or just in general?
In general, in life.
Oh dear. This is a surprise. I don't think it's easy one though, that as you promised. Oh dear.
Any advice, any little bits of wisdom.
Well, I'm sort of resorting back to if I was to talk to my end of PhD self, or during PhD, what would I say to my younger self in that sense? And I would say that don't look too much at other people's success story. You hear of people's career stories, life stories, when they've made it to something. Something's working for them, at least at that point in time. And it's working because they've worked hard from wherever they come from, and whatever adversity they may have had over time, they've worked really hard to combat it, mitigate it, find ways around it, whatever. And we're seeing the positive end results. And that's most of the time, that's why when they're sharing the story, and when you feel that inspiration from them, but at the same time thinking, how am I going to get there? The reality is most of us couldn't just follow the footsteps of someone else, so to speak, because the time is constantly changing, the funding environment is changing, the workforce is changing, the science itself is changing. So by the time that the PhD student graduates and gets into a career stage of their mentor, or dare say idol, it's not the same environment anymore. You simply couldn't reproduce the same decisions that they've made in life. You don't see them in all their hard times. You sort of see them in their successful, happy, smiling, confident self. You're not getting the behind the scenes stories. You're getting all of that of yourself. You see yourself when you're upset, feeling frustrated, feeling like a failure, feeling unsure, but you rarely see that of other people. And so for me, in my earlier years, PhD and straight after, I spent a lot of time thinking of all these successful people have done this by 1 year post-PhD, they're up to this, 3 years post-PhD, they're up to this X number of years after PhD, and where am I? Where am I? Where am I? Am I still on track? Am I doing the right thing? Am I building my career? I don't think there's a right answer to it. It's somewhat unusual for me to come to this fellowship this late in my career. I'm 12 years out, and certainly I don't have a typical path to success, so to speak. So it goes to show that wherever you might end up be, whether it's straight path in academia from postdoc to professorship, in industry, in science-related or unrelated jobs, the most important, you can't see what's going to come in 5, 10, 20 years' time. What you can make sure is that every step you make in between is something that's worthwhile for you, something that you enjoy, that you want to do at the point in time. And what you build out of it, you just honestly cannot foresee. So the successful stories are there to draw inspirations from, but don't be too stressed about trying to reproduce the steps. You will find your own way when you have the will, and it will take some time for some people, and for others it takes a lot of time, but eventually when you want to, you will get somewhere that you are happy with.
Wow. Thank you so much, Nancy. I've learned so much from this short 30 or so minutes talking to you. And congratulations again on your fellowship.
Thank
It's
you.
amazing. And also your baby to come. I'm so excited. And uh, I hope we have another discussion, season 2, sometime about many other topics. Thank you to everyone for listening. I hope you also got some great insights from Dr. Wang. And we will catch you in the next episode. Bye.